The Indian Forest Act of 1927, the forest bureaucracy has unfettered powers to lodge cases against tribals who go into the forest for collection of non-timber forest produce. Some amendments have been proposed to the Indian Forest Act, and I hope those amendments will see the light of day now. The Cabinet approved it in March of 2011, and I hope that in this session we'll be able to pass this legislation, because what it does is it redefines the relationship between the tribal and the forest guard. Because the first person that the tribal in these areas confronts is the forest bureaucracy. And the forest bureaucracy is a byword for harassment and a byword for making life difficult. And it is not a secret. I have said this on more than one occasion, and I have written to the chief ministers. It is not a secret that a very large number of tribals are in jail today on flimsy charges in Chhattisgarh, in Jharkhand, in Odisha. The police people recognize it. So the forest issue, the reform of the forest bureaucracy, the reform of forest laws, the whole issue of transferring control to tribal communities and the Gram Sabha is absolutely crucial. We have not been able to do much here. The only success I had when I was as minister was in Gadchiroli district. And you should, your second governance lecture, you should get somebody to give on what we did in Gadchiroli. It's also very important from a Naxal point of view, because Gadchiroli is one of the worst affected districts in our country. And what happened in Gadchiroli last April was that the control of the transit passbook for bamboo was transferred from the forest department to the Gram Sabha. And the net result of it is that last year, over the last 12 months, the Gram Sabha in Mendalekha village has an additional income of 1 crore of rupees. 1 crore. Whereas they used to get a few lakhs, 5 or 6 lakhs, when the forest department used to control the entire bamboo trade. The entire bamboo trade, which is the most lucrative of the non-timber forest produce, is now in the hands of the Gram Sabha. We are trying to do this in Saranda as well, but there is always a lot of opposition from the forest administration and the forest bureau. Who wants to let go of this lucrative trade in bamboo or trade in some other non-timber forest produce? So this whole issue of forest administration, the forest laws, the relationship between the tribal and the forest administration at the cutting edge level, the control over the bamboo movement, and the issue of non-timber forest produce, adding value to the non-timber forest produce and getting that value back to the tribal communities is going to be very significant from a livelihood perspective, the larger developmental perspective in the livelihoods area. Thirdly, these are areas where the health system has completely collapsed. If there is one area which you were to ask me and say, what if I was the czar of all these areas, what would I do for 24 hours? If I was the czar, God forbid. What I would do is make sure that basic health facilities are available in these areas. These are highly malaria endemic areas. I see my friend Shoma Chaudhary here. It's very sad that she lost a young colleague of hers who went as a photographer to one of these Saranda type areas and came, you know what happened to the young man. It's not uncommon to find such instances, and the health system simply does not exist. And I think the larger issues of health administration in tribal areas, which is leading to very high levels of malnutrition, very high levels of morbidity and mortality, and very low life expectancy is something that we must come to grips with sooner rather than later. So I think these are the three large issues, developmental issues. The issue of mining, how do we make it ecologically sustainable and socially beneficial from a local point of view, not from a national point of view. Because mining is always good from India's point of view. It's all from the local perspective that mining imposes huge costs, which we often tend to neglect in our calculations. The second issue of forest administration, the reform of the forest bureaucracy, forest laws, the empowerment of the Gram Sabhas or the Palli Sabhas, as the case may be, as empowered under PESA, which was passed, the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act was passed in 1996. But no state government till today has made PESA a reality. Not one government has made PESA a reality in their states. And third, the larger issue of some basic developmental initiatives, prime amongst whom I would place health. Because without the security of a basic health, services being provided, I think all other interventions, whether it is in education, whether it is in transportation that we are doing, employment, livelihoods, becomes infructuous. So let me end, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that the Saranda Development Plan is a bold initiative. And I think I'm not 10 months later, we've had good success. We've also had disappointments. We've also had failures. And I can talk about it when we discuss it. But the most important thing that I see after my repeated visits to Saranda is that people are now beginning to demand things. People are giving me representations. People are complaining that there is no BDO. In fact, it's ironic that as I speak to you today, Manoharpur block does not have a block development officer. It's tragic, but that's the reality that I have to live with. So people are coming forward, they're making demands, they're complaining, and that's the essence of development. That's the essence of a democratic way of resolving some of these issues. I see in all these areas a complete absence of political mobilization. The Saranda Developmental Plan is a developmental plan. It will get the development right, hopefully. It will provide employment, it will provide housing, it will add value to livelihoods, it will build roads. But what it will not do is to set the politics right. And to my mind, that is fundamental. If we don't get political activity going in the Naxal-affected areas, developmental initiatives by themselves are not going to take us very far. You need a combination of political mobilization by mainstream political parties, by regional political parties. You need a combination of political mobilization in which youth are attracted to join political cadres and not Maoist cadres, as is happening today. A combination of political mobilization, the tribal-centered developmental initiatives of the type the Saranda Development Plan epitomizes, and of course, security operations. One should not minimize the importance of the security operations. None of this would have been possible in Saranda without the presence of the CRPF. Let's be very clear. We have a tendency in our country to demonize the security forces. I think that's completely wrong and misplaced. It's the security forces in Saranda, in Sarju, in Abuj Mahad, or in Balaghat in Madhya Pradesh, which are creating the conditions which enable politicians and administrators to go in and carry out their developmental activities. So let's not be under any illusion that development by itself will solve this problem. You need this combination, you need this troika of political mobilization, tribal-centered developmental activities, and a sensitive security strategy, all working hand in hand. And I think if we do this, you will see the replication of the Saranda model. Already, I have already announced yesterday that the second Saranda development plan will be implemented in Sarju. Sarju is another liberated area. It was under Maoist control. This is in Latehar district and Gadwar district of Jharkhand. It was under Maoist control for almost 15 years. It's about 4,000 square kilometers, 12 gram panchayats, 4 blocks. So it's much bigger than Saranda. It's about 5 times Saranda. I've just yesterday announced that we're going to have the Sarju development plan. We're going to start the Sarju development plan based on the confidence that we have gained in Saranda. And I can only hope that governance now will post a second correspondent in Sarju and give us the type of feedback that young Sarthak has been giving us. So I want to congratulate governance now, not a mainstream publication by any means, unlike the other glossies that we are subjected to, for taking so much time and effort for making this investment and seeing some value in a developmental intervention like the Saranda Development Plan. And I look forward not just to positive news, as I said, but I look forward to constantly getting the stream of bad news. And it's only after I got some negative news from Sarthak on the Indira Awas Yojana. I must give you this example, and I'll end here. We promised that 6,000 families would get Indira Awas Yojana, and after 4 months, I discovered that only 2,000 had actually been given the money, the first installment. And when I heard this, I called the district officials, I called the bankers, and we discovered where the problem lay. Problem lay in the fact that the 3 banks, the State Bank of India, the Canara Bank, and the Bank of India, did not have the adequate resources or the manpower to open 6,000 accounts. And therefore, this was not a demand-side problem, this was a supply-led problem. And we finally fixed this problem, and in the next few days, all the 6,000 families would start getting the financial assistance under Indira Awas Yojana. So I thank Sarthak particularly for giving us this ground level truth, ground level realities. But I think what I've tried to convey to you is a broad flavor of an experiment that we have started, an experiment at consolidating security successes with developmental interventions, and I am hopeful that sooner rather than later this would get replicated in other parts of the country as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. B.V. Rao, Editor Governance, now to facilitate audience questions for the Minister.